guys, if you are new to this channel, my name is Erin. I just got back to the United States after a year of living in Mexico, in the beautiful Guanajuato City, Guanajuato, Mexico. Now, today I am continuing my series, So You Want to Move to Mexico, where I am taking as much information as I can and packing it into 7 videos to help you research or plan a move to Mexico. And today is going to be, I'm gonna call it the most controversial video in the series. If you wanna make people mad on the internet, start talking about safety in Mexico. This is the one topic guaranteed to pretty much make everybody angry. Yeah, but we're gonna do that because if you are planning a move to Mexico, this is something you need to know about. And I have seen so much misinformation on the Facebook groups. We have got to start talking about this honestly and frankly, and that is what we are going to do today. Before we jump into that, if you are not on Patreon yet, go ahead and join us over there. I give all patrons, regardless of contribution level, access to behind the scenes content, vlog content made specifically for patrons, and I can answer in-depth questions about moving to Mexico, living in Mexico, etc., 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 all of that over on Patreon. So if you haven't done that already, go ahead and do that now. You can join us for as little as $1 a month. Basically, that is a way for me to speak to a smaller audience. No trolls allowed. It's a very nice and safe space over there. All right, I want to start this conversation with 2 things that I think are absolutely not helpful and fairly meaningless when we are talking about safety in Mexico. The first is comparing Mexico to the United States. Now, it is not possible to put something out on the internet about safety in Mexico and not have somebody say, yeah, but Detroit, oh, Chicago. Let's just start with the assumption that no place on earth is 100% safe all the time. And just like you would not compare crime levels in Chicago to a little tiny town in Ohio or wherever, you also cannot compare Mexico to the United States and have that really mean anything. Saying that there is crime in the United States is like, yeah, yes, congratulations. I am not making this video for people who want to move to Chicago, and therefore the crime rate in Chicago is absolutely meaningless to this discussion. I am making this video for people who are considering a move to Mexico. And so the only information that is relevant is information about crime and safety in Mexico. Meaningless point number 2, whether someone feels safe. Here's the thing. It is possible for you to feel safe even when you are not. And it is also possible for you to feel unsafe when you are safe. We all know those people who can walk into a completely fine situation and be terrified about something. And we all know those people who are so oblivious that they could walk right into a situation that's actually pretty risky and have 0 clue. All right, so whether somebody feels safe in Mexico or not actually doesn't tell you anything other than how they felt when they were there. This is another answer that people often give on Facebook groups. They will say, I feel safer in Mexico than I do in the United States, or I've lived here and I feel safe. Oliver has joined us, which is great. It's wonderful. I don't have a problem if you feel safe in Mexico, but that only tells us how you feel. And when you are researching a move to Mexico, it doesn't actually matter if somebody else feels safe there or not. So I can tell you how I felt in Mexico, and that might give you some information, but what it really is going to tell you is how I felt in Mexico, and it doesn't really tell you anything other than that. So let's get right into it. Is Mexico safe? I can't answer that question, which I know you saw that one coming. You can't answer that question, but okay, baby, Oliver, you're gonna have to find somewhere else to be. Okay, so is Mexico safe? I can't answer that question. And here's why I say this is a topic that can make everybody mad, because what people want you to say is it is either always safe, completely 100% safe. If you're not involved in the cartel, then you are always going to be completely fine, or it's a terrible, scary place with gangs around every corner just waiting to attack you. And I'm not gonna say either one of those things because I don't think that's the truth. I have said this before and got actually surprised that people would have a problem with it, but I always look for the middle ground between the two extremes because I think that's generally where the truth usually is. It's usually not one side or the other. So that is what you're gonna get from me. If you don't like that, if you have a problem with gray areas, which I've had people comment that they do specifically have a problem with the gray areas, then this is not the video for you. I believe that you should be as informed as you can possibly be about what's going on. I don't think this means you're living in fear, and that's where I'm going to diverge from a lot of people on Facebook, because it seems like there is this attitude that if you talk about crime in Mexico, that you are just living in terror, that you're like, oh, the cartel's gonna get me. No, guys, be informed about what's going on so that you can make wise choices. This does not mean you're panicked all the time, just because you could admit, hey, there is crime in Mexico, and the more you know about it, the more you can protect yourself as much as you possibly can. Take the Facebook groups with a major grain of salt. I know people who have been kicked out of Facebook groups for sharing news stories about crime in Mexico. There are a lot of people with financial interests in Mexico who are working very hard to make sure that information about crime in Mexico does not get out. People really, really don't want you to know a lot of what's going on because that could hurt their bottom line. Now, I am not telling you whether you should or shouldn't move to Mexico. I don't care whether you move to Mexico. It has nothing to do with me. I care that you have the most accurate, reliable information that you can to make a decision, a very big, important decision in your life. All right, guys, I have a young child, and so my risk tolerance is going to be extremely low because I am not going to take chances with my kid. If I were young and single, it might be different. Your risk tolerance is going to be a very personal thing that only you can decide. I am going to give you my perspective, but remember, I'm coming from a very cautious place because I have a young child and I'm simply not willing to take any chances with her safety and well-being. So the thing about safety in Mexico, this is a very serious topic. I think people dismiss it and they're very cavalier about it online. I think that's dangerous. I don't think that that's useful. So we are gonna take it seriously today. And another thing to note is that things change fast. So I am not going to give you specifics on, is this part of Mexico safe, is that part of Mexico safe, etc. Because by the time I release this, that information could change. If you're watching this a year from now, that information has probably changed. When we moved to Guanajuato and when we left Guanajuato, it was two fairly different safety scenarios. It changed that much that quickly. I think a lot of expats, and I've certainly been in this category myself, we're responding to the hysteria that surrounds Mexico. The idea that it's just this terrible place with all these bad hombres and like everybody's out to get you and oh, be scared. We're responding to that a lot of the times, but I think we sometimes go a little bit overboard. No, I don't think you need to be panicked about coming to Mexico. No, I don't think everybody in Mexico is out to get you. But yes, crime is real and it can happen to you. All right, so if somebody were moving to the US and they said, is the US safe? You would probably ask, where are you moving to? Are you moving to Memphis? Are you moving to rural Idaho? Because crime rates in the United States vary greatly from city to city, and even within a city, from neighborhood to neighborhood. We know that, and I only speak of the United States because that's where I'm from. So be very cautious when somebody is giving you blanket statements about an area. Here's the problem you run into. When you know a place really well, you know what areas are safe and what areas are a little sketchy. You also kind of have an idea of how to tell that information. I have found that expats are generally very bad at this in Mexico. We generally don't have a very good idea about when we're in a part of town that's sketchy and when we're in a part of town that's just totally fine. And a lot of times I think people expect this to go the other way. They expect expats to be kind of freaked out like, oh my gosh, I saw graffiti. I must be in danger. But honestly, I've seen it more the opposite way. I've seen it more where people don't know they're in a bad part of town and they just think everything's fine. And the thing is, like, we were never really good at being able to tell whether an area was safe or not. And also areas can change. We thought our neighborhood was totally safe when we moved there. And by the end, it really wasn't. Now, did we just become more aware of the situation that was always the case? Or did things change? It's kind of hard to say. Another thing you have to know is that if something is going on in your neighborhood, you might not be aware of it. You know, there were loads of break-ins in our neighborhood by the time we left, and the only way we knew about it was either the Facebook group talking about it or our Mexican friends telling us, hey, be really careful in your neighborhood. This is what's going on right now. In fact, by the end of it, our Mexican friends were telling us, don't be out at night without your dog. And honestly, if we had not had our Mexican friends, we would have zero idea about it. You know, your neighbors are not going to knock on your door and be like, hey, just so you know, this is what's going on. There's not like a neighborhood newsletter going around. So until you're really integrated in the community, then the likelihood of you being really aware of the security situation is actually kind of low. So that brings me to my first point of advice when you move to Mexico is do everything you can to make Mexican friends as soon as possible. Now, this kind of feels a little weird because it feels like you got like a quota, you know, there's some little like profiling going on. I don't mean it like that. I just mean that as a foreigner, yes, absolutely make friends with other expats. You will find beautiful people in the expat community, but also make an effort to meet people from the local community because they are going to be your best source of reliable and accurate safety information in your town. Another thing you can do to be as informed as possible is to read local papers. This is not going to tell you everything that's going on, but it is going to give you a better sense of what's happening. Pay attention to the State Department warnings. I know a lot of people blow these off as some type of political thing or a partisan thing, but and if you're concerned about that, you can always look at the travel warnings given out by the UK or Canada if you're not sure that you trust the ones given out by the US. But those warnings are there for a reason. Is not to say that the states that have a level 4 travel warning are gonna be always dangerous in all circumstances for all people. However, you need to know that you are taking on more risk when you travel to an area that is labeled do not travel. If you are going to be living in Mexico long term, I would recommend getting a dog. Get a big barking dog. Honestly, our neighborhood was having a lot of break-ins by the time we left, and I really, really believe that PETA was our best security feature. She barked like a crazy dog in Mexico. The funny thing is, like, she doesn't bark a lot here in the US, but when we would take her out on walks, she would lose her mind. She would bark at every dog. She hated gas tanks. So the poor gas guy walking around with the big tanks, she like would lose her mind. Pigeons, she was very upset with pigeons. You know, so every day, everybody in that neighborhood saw us with this crazy dog, this crazy vicious seeming dog. And I really, really, really believe that that kept our house safe. Pretty much everybody in Mexico has a dog. It seems like everybody in not everybody in Mexico has a dog, I know, guys. But at least in our neighborhood, a lot of people have dogs and a lot of people have big barking dogs, and they use the dogs as security. And when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Get yourself a dog. Look who joined us. Hey! Oh, yes, I know. Yeah, you're a good girl. Oh, yes, you're a good dog. Also, I mean, dogs are great. They're quite wonderful. All right, can you sit down? Lay down. Another thing that really gets to me with conversations about safety in Mexico is that people will say, if you're not involved in the cartel, you're totally fine. And frankly, that's not true. There are people who have been killed who were not involved in the cartel. There have been innocent bystanders caught up in cartel situations. And so when we say things like, if you're not looking for trouble, it won't find you, I think about the families of the people who have been caught up in it. And can you imagine how it would feel if your family was affected by cartel violence and then in walks this foreigner who's just like, oh, well, you know, nothing's gonna happen to me. Everything's fine. And if you have a problem in Mexico, you were probably asking for it anyway. You know, maybe in the past you could get away with that more easily, but I think at this point, the situation has devolved to a certain degree where I don't think we can safely say that everybody who is being affected is involved with the cartel. You can be a bystander. That can happen to you. And it has happened to people and who were completely innocent. And so I hope that we can sort of stop repeating that idea because I do think it could be potentially disrespectful to the people who are being affected by violence in Mexico. Statistically speaking, more Americans are murdered in Mexico than in all the other countries that we go on vacation to combined. In 2016, 31 million Americans visited Mexico and 75 of them were murdered, compared to 49 million Americans who vacationed elsewhere, and of them, 69 people were murdered. So by the numbers, as an American, you are more likely to be killed in Mexico than you are in other places. However, 75 out of 31 million is still a really low number. So do you need to take it seriously? Yes, you do need to take it seriously. Do you need to be panicked? No. You are probably much more likely to die in a car accident in the United States than you are to be murdered by the cartel in Mexico. Statistically speaking, I do think you can make a case for a foreigner being safer in Mexico than a Mexican national. I think we need to be careful about how we talk about that, because there are a lot of people for whom Mexico is a very dangerous place. There are people who have been forced out of Mexico by the cartel and who cannot return for fear of their life. And so to me, if I were in that situation and then I saw a bunch of foreigners in my country bragging about how safe they were, that would sting. So please, let's be respectful as we talk about this issue. A lot of times when people talk about safety in Mexico, they're talking about how likely am I to be murdered by the cartel. All right, that's one issue. But I think an issue that is more likely to affect you is a home invasion. Guanajuato, for example, has a huge issue with home invasions. And not a lot of people know this, not a lot of people are talking about this. And as an expat, you're not always going to know what makes your house safe and what makes it unsafe. I know of houses with multiple doors, multiple locks, bars on every window, bars on the door, and the house was still broken into. So, just because I can't see how somebody could break into a place doesn't mean they can't, because I don't know a lot about how to break into houses. So I wouldn't know a lot about how to prevent house break-ins. This is something that you need to consider, you need to keep in mind. And when you're renting or buying a place, try to make that place as safe as you possibly can. So all in all, what I really want to say is that safety in Mexico is complicated, it's complex, it is ever-changing. And if somebody tells you that it's not, if somebody tells you that it's simple, if somebody tells you that it's black and white, if somebody tells you that you're always gonna be fine or it's a terrible place and you shouldn't go, don't listen to them. Find yourself some reliable sources who are going to give you both sides, who are going to say, here are your risks, here is how you can minimize your risks. Am I trying to scare you away from Mexico? No, absolutely not. I am not telling you to be afraid of Mexico. I'm not telling you to not live in Mexico. I am not telling you that anything bad is going to happen to you in Mexico. I am also not telling you that nothing bad could happen to you in Mexico. I think the way you stay safe is by being informed and by not being naive about the nature of reality, which is that no place is utopia. No place is a fantasy land where everybody's good, everybody's your friend, and no one is out to do you any harm. That doesn't exist on Earth. It certainly doesn't exist in Mexico. So I hope this video was helpful to you. If you are planning a move to Mexico, I've got lots of information about living in Mexico, moving to Mexico, prepping for the move, choosing a city, all of that stuff. I will link my website down below. You can visit there and check that out. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified when I release the next video in this series. I will see you in the next video. Bye.